Ultima Underworld: The Stygian Abyss is a first-person dungeon-crawling role-playing game. It was developed by Blue Sky Productions, who would later turn into Looking Glass Studios, and originally released in 1992. This game is usually cited as being one of the first 3D role-playing games, and the inspiration for later games such as Doom and the Elder Scrolls series. In late June of 2021, Electronic Arts removed Syndicate Wars Ultima Underworld 1 and 2 from GOG. Then they were returned to GOG for free for a month, and that's when I snagged a copy for myself. One of the articles I found said someone at EA dropped the ball by pulling the games from the store, but my money's on EA just forgetting they were selling these games at all. I know EA has basically just let a bunch of older games become abandonware, but that's an entirely different topic. The default sound settings are goofy at best and awful at the worst. Moving around sounds like you're walking on a piano, and the worst is probably the bats that sound like an alarm clock going off. The DOSBox sound settings need to be changed from the Roland MT32 to Sound Blaster Pro. GOG releases are mostly just download and play, so having to mess with the default settings is a bit odd, especially when the fix is this simple. The only other configuration I had to do was digging around in the initialization file to change the resolution for the window mode to something more modern and messing with the DOSBox configuration to record the game.
At last, you are asleep. For 3 nights, each attempt to rest has brought you starting from your bed in fright.
Treachery and doom.
The game starts off with a voice cutscene explaining why you're stuck in the abyss. I'm going to abridge it a bit. After a few restless nights' sleep, you allow a spirit to teleport you to a faraway land. You are teleported into the bedroom of Baron Almeric's daughter, Ariel, just in time to see her get kidnapped, and then you get thrown into the abyss to find her. The voice acting is okay. The only thing I really have to say about it is that it feels like the guard's job isn't to throw me into prison, but to remind me that I have the mentality of a 12-year-old.
Forgive us, my lord.
Character creation is pretty straightforward. You get your choice of gender, dominant hand, and a selection of different classes. You have your standard choices of fighter, mage, and I guess the bard is the thief stand-in here. There's a nice selection to choose from, but once you get into the actual gameplay, the only real difference between classes is what skills and stats you start with. Your class determines how your attributes are distributed and what skills you get to select from starting off. The attribute spread is what one would expect for the most part, like the fighter has high strength, some dexterity, and low intelligence. Except for some reason the druid and paladin are swapped. Druids have higher strength and intelligence than dexterity, while paladins have more dexterity and intelligence than strength. Character stats work pretty much how you expect them to. Strength determines carry weight and attack damage, dexterity determines hit and evasion chance, and intelligence affects your mana pool and spellcasting. The lowest a stat roll can be is 12, the highest is 30, and all 3 stats combined cannot exceed 60. The stats are rolled randomly based on the class, and you can't raise or lower them after character creation. You also have Vitality, which determines how much health you can get each level. For some reason, all of the skills you can get are tied to Strength, Dexterity, or Intelligence. All of the combat skills are considered strength skills, even the ranged attack skill. Intelligence is linked to the magic skills, which leaves Dexterity to all the non-combat skills. This is a bit strange because dexterity has an effect on skills like the ability to repair equipment or conversation skills, in addition to skills like acrobatics or lockpicking. Once you're done with making a character, you're just dumped in the abyss and need to find Ariel to get out. Well, there's a lot to cover about the basics, so let's start with character movement. The movement controls come very close to the standard WASD movement expected in most first-person games today. The best way for me to explain the differences for moving is that everything is moved down a row of keys. For moving forward, W runs and S is for walking. The A and D keys turn your character, X is for moving backwards, and Z and C are for sidestepping. On top of all of this, you can also hold down the Shift key to move in exact increments instead of the more realistic normal movement. Jumping is done either by pressing the J key or by clicking both the left and right mouse buttons simultaneously when a weapon isn't drawn. Holding shift and pressing J does a standing long jump. You can also control the height of your character when flying by pressing either Q or E keys. Looking up or down is done by pressing the 1 or 3 keys, and centering your view is done by pressing the 2 key. There is a problem with the sidestepping in that it is way too slow to be used for moving around outside of lining up jumps. The biggest problems I had moving about in the Abyss is that running into the walls at an angle turns your character, and I often got the up and down control swapped. If you don't care for moving with the keyboard, you could always just move by left-clicking in the viewport. Right-clicking with the mouse is how you interact with the world based on which action you have selected. Otherwise, I didn't find it too troublesome to move around in the Abyss outside of a few jumps here and there. Now, moving on to the game's UI and options menu. In the center of the screen is the viewport. This is the window into the game world where conversations, combat, and puzzles are solved. The 2 serpents on the side are purely cosmetic, while the gargoyle on top displays enemy health when in combat. The character interactions and options menu are on the left-hand side. Starting from the top, there is the options menu. You can save or load a game with 4 save slots in total. The sound and music can either be turned on or off. And there are 4 different quality settings ranging from low to highest. The first interaction is the talk action, which allows you to start conversations with willing inhabitants of the Abyss. Then the grab icon, which allows you to pick up items and place them in your inventory or toss them around. The eyeball is the look command. It lets you get descriptions of items and your surroundings and allows you to read plaques and signs. If none of the interactions are selected, then this is the default action. The sword starts combat mode, which comes with a change in music. And finally, the hand holding a key allows you to use items in the world like push buttons or open doors. The big text box on the bottom shows the description of things you look at in the dungeon, warnings of item degradation, and error messages. This is also where you type in mantras for getting skill points or keywords in certain conversations. The compass is used to tell which direction you're facing, and clicking on it has you speculate on the time of day and how hungry or tired you are. The compass itself is a good thing to have, but it's a little slow in updating which direction you're facing. The rune shelf is in the bottom right. This is where your runes for your current spell are displayed. Left-clicking on the bar attempts to cast a spell. If you don't have the correct runes or enough mana, you will get an error message in the text box. The right side has your equipment inventory, and if you clicked on the pull chain, it will reveal your character stats. You have 6 slots for equipment besides a doll for your armor. The 2 small circles are for rings, the bottom 2 circles are for your hands, and the top 2 are your shoulders. The 2 hand slots are for your weapon and shield. You're limited to either just using a weapon or sword and board. The shoulder slots are best used for the map and a light source. And the circle with a number is how much weight you can carry. The bottom 8 circles are for your inventory. You can find other items like bags to get more inventory room, but each container has its own weight limit. Under the inventory is where your health and mana is located. Clicking on a flask will tell you how much you currently have out of your maximum. The health flask will turn green when poisoned, and they will bubble occasionally when they're not full. My initial impression of the game is that I can see how this game influenced most of the first-person games that came after it, like Doom, or built upon it to improve later games like System Shock. I was initially impressed by how much it gets right, but there's definitely room for improvements to be made here. This is a game where you're encouraged to make your own notes, so if you decide to descend into the Abyss, you're going to need to keep track of certain tasks and phrases to help you get out in one piece. Outside of the map, there's no way to keep track of these things in-game, so a notebook or text file will be good to have on hand. The map is a useful item to have while stuck in the Abyss, but it also has a few problems. The most important is that it takes up an inventory space. When marking down a place of interest, the text starts where you click, so depending on how descriptive you want the map note to be, the text could end up covering up staircases, and the font chosen for notes could be hard to read at times. The marker for the player only shows your current position and not which direction you're facing, which doesn't help much with navigation. You can also erase notes made on the map with the eraser, but this can be a bit finicky. The map you are given does fill in automatically, and the geography like bridges, water, and lava are colored differently than the regular passageways. Overall, the map does a really good job of telling you where you have and haven't been for the most part. Now, does the map help you from getting lost and going down the wrong path? Not really, but that's more of a problem with how there isn't much variation in the walls or geography and having to pay attention to the direction the compass is pointing. For those of us who aren't good with words or keep a dictionary handy, one of the definitions of Stygian means very dark. A very noticeable feature of the game is the lighting system. Candles, torches, lamps, and magic are the main sources of light for you down in the abyss. Outside of a few enchanted items, your light sources are timed and you can run out and be stuck wandering in the dark if you don't have a backup prepared. The only natural source of light in the abyss, if you can even call it that, is the lava found on the lower levels. A lot of the information you get about the abyss and what dwells in it is done via conversations. The first person I came across down here was an outcast named Braggett. He told me that the items scattered around nearby belong to the Baron's men and that scavenging is a good way to get supplies down here. He also warned me of the goblins, told me of the nearby human camp, and to look out for onks, as areas with them were signs of civilization in the abyss. After some exploring, I found the human encampment Braggett told me of and talked to GOG the Blessed. I asked him about why he was called that, and ugh. After recovering from that mistake, I talked to the leader Hagbard, and he tells me that he saw the Baron's daughter get dragged deeper into the abyss. Most of the information from conversations can be seen once, but a lot of these conversations are just informing you about the current area or problems with the local politics. I don't think you can miss the plot important stuff, but you can miss out on some things that might help if you aren't paying attention or keeping good notes. Most of the inhabitants of the Abyss also speak in a ye olden English, so expect a bunch of these and thous when talking to people. You can also trade with people. It works like bartering, where you can make an offer for certain goods and they will ask for more stuff if they don't think they're getting a good deal. There are only a few people in the Abyss that deal solely in gold coins, so carrying around a massive pile of gold isn't needed. One of the biggest setbacks in the Abyss is dying. If you haven't saved at all when you die, you go back to the main menu and need to make a new character. There is a way to subvert death, and it's an interesting way to make your own checkpoints. The silver sapling is found on the first level in the southeast corner. When the sapling is picked up, it turns into a seed and can be planted in any dirt floor in the Abyss. After planting the sapling yourself, once you die, you respawn where the sapling was planted and lose some experience points. There's only one sapling in the Abyss, and no matter where you are, as long as you've planted the sapling, you don't need to make a new character or reload an old save file when you die. I wasn't expecting the sapling to be as lenient as it is, after having played both of the System Shocks before playing Ultima Underworld. Where in System Shock there's a respawn point on almost every level, and finding them is one of the first things you want to do just because it makes your life easier. I have a problem with using the sapling, and it isn't the corpse run, surprisingly enough. It's already planted when I found it, meaning someone or something down here was using it. This leaves me wondering who exactly I've doomed down here and what horrible fate they find themselves in, expecting to pop back up here only to find themselves in the afterlife. When exploring the Abyss, you will often run across various creatures. Looking at them will give you a general idea of how they are feeling. Only if they are hostile will the creature attack you unprovoked. Not everything you encounter down here wants you dead, but when they do, you need to be able to defend yourself. Combat for the most part is just one big slapfest. Attacking consists of picking an attack and then waiting for the gem in the bottom left to fully charge. Holding down the right mouse button causes the gem to go from red to yellow to green. When the gem is red, it will cancel the attack, which is useful if you misclick. If the gem is yellow or green, then you will swing your weapon with green attacks dealing more damage. The speed of the gem changing colors depends on what weapon you're using. The health of your current enemy is shown by the gargoyle's eyes on the top of the screen, and the amount of damage done is shown by the size of the hit indicator, the red or yellow explosions on the enemy. Outside of the changes in battle music, I found it really hard to tell how combat is playing out. I will admit I never really noticed the gargoyle at all playing this. I thought it was just like the serpents on the side of the viewport and just purely cosmetic. There are 4 types of melee attacks. The attacks depend on the position of the cursor on the viewport or a different key press. The top of the viewport, or the P key, is the bash attack. The middle of the viewport, or the semicolon key, is the slash attack, and the bottom of the viewport, or the period key, initiates a stab attack. Each of the melee weapons does more damage with a specific type of attack. Swords and axes are best at slashing, maces are good at bashing, and daggers are for stabbing. If you don't have a weapon equipped or put a weapon in your non-dominant hand, you punch. The punch is useful for bashing open locked doors and not much else. There are ranged weapons and magical attacks in the game, but the drawbacks of using them make it not worth the investment. The big one is that you can't hit enemies that are too close to you. Since most enemies want to be in your face, this makes ranged combat a poor choice. And that's before you factor in things like finding ammo for your weapons, skill investment, and being able to see the enemy you want to hit from a distance. When you want to spend skill points from leveling up, you first need to find a shrine and chant a mantra. The shrine on the first level has 3 plaques nearby that have mantras for attack, magic, and non-combat skills. When using these mantras, you gain points in up to 3 random skills from the pool the mantra governs. This isn't very useful as you can end up getting skills you don't want at all. As far as I can tell, the only mantra worth using here is the magic one, because it only has 3 skills to choose from and 2 are needed for casting spells, and the other skill is used in identifying magic items. The mantras you find here are also the only ones listed in the manual for the game, which just makes using them sort of a beginner's trap. There are mantras for specific skills, but you need to find them in the abyss, but that could be 2 or 3 floors deeper than where you are now. The mantras can be found by helping out NPCs or in random scraps of paper, so you need to be on the lookout for them. There are a lot of different skills to choose from, but most of them are useless or magic just does a better job. This is mostly because while you could spend points to level up lockpicking to open a locked door, you could also use a spell or just punch the door open. While having a bunch of different solutions to a problem you could face is nice, it just makes spending points on non-combat skills seem like a waste in the long run. From my experience in the Abyss, you only need to focus on 4 or 5 skills. What skills those are depend on what kind of character you want to play as, but investing in a weapon skill and a defense skill are the only 2 I feel are needed for any playthrough. There is some light survival aspects that you need to plan around. You occasionally need to sleep and eat. Sleeping is how you recover health and mana, and the amount is based on how well fed you are when you went to sleep. It's not something that you need to worry about all the time unless you need healing or to recharge your mana. Your equipment and weapons all have durability. An unskilled weapon user can damage their weapon attacking with it, and you can also have your armor damaged by being attacked. You can repair your equipment at an anvil, but you can end up damaging the items more than they already were if you fail at the attempt. Plus, anvils aren't a common object found in the Abyss. There is one NPC that you meet that can repair items for you, but that costs both time and gold. The largest problem with repairing items is that you can always find more or better equipment just by exploring more of the Abyss, and once your skills are high enough, the items never seem to get damaged anyway. This makes durability something you only need to worry about in the first couple of floors. After finding the rune bag, which shouldn't take too long after entering the Abyss, you can cast spells. To cast a spell, you need to pick out the correct runes in the bag, and then click on them to put them in the rune shelf. Then you right-click on the rune shelf to attempt to cast the spell. There are 8 circles of magic, and the highest circle you can cast spells from is based on your character level divided in half, rounded up. The mana cost of a given spell depends on the circle of the spell, and failing to cast a spell doesn't consume any mana. The runes you need to cast spells are scattered around the abyss, and you can find duplicate runes. My biggest problem with the magic system is that there is no in-game spellbook or a way to quickly swap between spells. You can find a few spells exploring the abyss, but the majority of them are found in the game's manual. As for the spell selection, it's a lot like Morrowind, where the offensive spells aren't bad, it's just that the utility spells get more use and can completely make some skills redundant. Using magic to heal, fly, or just create food is a better way to spend your mana than throwing lightning or fireballs. There are also magical items, scrolls, and potions strewn about on each floor of the abyss. Your lore skill determines if you can identify if an item is magical or not. For example, you find a ring on the ground, pick it up, and look at it in your inventory. You'll be told what metal the ring is made of and its condition. If you can identify if the item has a magical property but don't know what it is, the ring will be described as a magical ring. If you can tell what kind of magic the ring has, the description will tell you what magic the ring has been enchanted with, like Ring of Light or Ring of Jumping. Like repairing items, there's an NPC that will identify magical items for you for a price. For the items that cast spells, it helps to know what the spell actually does, as there's no in-game description of spell effects. I found that this makes casting spells with identified items just as risky as using unidentified ones. As far as the dungeon crawling goes, I will admit that I'm easy to please. There's enough going on in the abyss to keep me going, but I don't think this is a game I see myself replaying. There are some good parts, like a decent jump scare ghost and the occasional puzzle. The level design of each floor tries to be unique or have some theme built around it. The first few floors are fairly straightforward in their quest and how you progress through them, which makes sense as you kind of need to be eased into how the game controls. Once you start getting closer to the bottom floors, all of them start turning into mazes. In fact, one side quest has you run through a recreation of a Pac-Man maze. I'm not joking. You pick up pellets, fight ghosts, and it even has a screen-wrapping teleport. This is somewhat manageable with the map, but environments lack enough visual diversity to make telling where you're going a pain at times. The quests you get sent on in the Abyss are mostly fetch quests or your standard go here, kill that. For the most part, the tasks that are asked of you are fairly straightforward and don't require much outside of exploration or some combat. There are a few that make me scratch my head wondering what the point of it all was, though, or accomplishing the task is just tedious. The third level is an underground swamp that is the home of the lizardmen. The challenge associated with the lizards is that they don't speak in the tongue of humans. You can find an interpreter on this floor to help with translating, but he's in prison and wants you to get him out. To do this, you then have to go up to the lizard in charge of the jail, talk to them, and then go back to the prisoner, then manually type in a word the lizard spoke you want translated. Then decipher the meaning of the word via gestures given, because the prisoner is mute. Then you repeat the whole process until you figure out why the man is in prison in the first place. This whole puzzle got tedious for me real fast. The prisoner is also a mage, or at least part of the group of mages stuck in here. So after translating the lizard language, you find out he's being imprisoned there for stealing food. This just raises a few questions for me, and they don't get answered. Making food with magic isn't very hard to do. You just need the right runes to cast the spell. Does this mean casting magic needs an incantation along with the runes? Did the prisoner just lose his runes, or is he out of mana? Another thing is that the lizard man guarding his cell is the only one you need to speak to in the entire game. There is no king lizard that needs you to kill the local swamp monster, or some other task that makes having a list of translated words and phrases worth the time putting into getting it. As for the plot of the game, I know next to nothing about the Ultima series other than it being an overly British offshoot of Dungeons & Dragons, and what I know of the plot of Underworld is even less. I feel like the story for this can be set in any fantasy setting and still work. Starting your journey off in the Abyss is the standard Save the Princess plot. You also get to find out some things about the prison you're stuck in and its inhabitants, but most of the conversations just feel like fluff stringing together objectives and locations. There is a bit more to the overall plot of the game, but honestly I don't think it's worth talking about. The guy who kidnaps the princess, the Duke's daughter, does have a reason for doing so, but by the time you get to that point in the game, it made me feel like the justification just feels tacked on. It comes off as a bad plot twist that's there to extend the length of the game. So, after all the running around in the Abyss, do I recommend getting this game for yourself? No, not really. I can see how this influenced a lot of different people in games that came after it, but it just felt like I was running around a large underground maze by the end of it. It is a neat piece of gaming history, but at the end of the day, this is an okay game overall. You aren't missing out much if you pass it up. Maybe the sequel is better, but that's something I'm gonna have to find out later. Ultima Underworld can only be bought as a package deal with the sequel for about $6 on GOG, or less if it's on sale. Thanks for watching and see you next video.